Hello, Happy New Year and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today I'm one third of what we hope will be a fun and informative show. Remember folks, the Echo Chamber podcast is a free-flowing conversation that may occasionally touch on mature subjects. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Martin McMahon. How are you, Martin? How's your Christmas?
Happy New Year to you, Tony. Christmas was nice, thank you.
Good to see you. More importantly, we're delighted to be joined in the Tortoise Shack by author, linguist, constant voice for the inner city youth, and one of our preeminent, by your own admission, smart arses, Frankie, yeah? Frankie Gaffney. Frankie, well, no stranger to controversy, is, for my money, one of the most sincere voices around, and his calls for unity come from a desire for a fairer society. Frankie, thanks so much for bringing us to the podcast.
Thanks a million for having me. It's great stuff you're doing here, so I think you're doing God's work.
Two atheists doing
God's chamber.
Yeah. There's no feedback on it.
Sorry.
No, you're grand. That's our fault. I should have explained. Listen, Frankie, I'm going to jump straight in. What I said about you being a voice for the youth culture and people talking, I've watched you on things and I've seen you advocate for what's actually going on. What do you think in terms of the real challenges that are facing, as opposed to, we hear the economy's grown by 10% and yet on the streets we're not seeing that at all?
Yeah, well, I suppose housing, like, young people can't afford a place to live, and this isn't young people that are on job seekers or that are unemployed or whatever. It's young people not only with jobs. It's couples with a job each. The rents are just astronomical, and we have a government that's determined to push that up and push house prices up. So if the basics of housing, education, and health. I think are the real material issues that people are faced with in our society. It's different in other places in the world, but in Ireland to 2017, soon to be 2018. Those are the issues to me. It's
crazy when you think about it in that perspective, that the simplest things, like 100 years after our emancipation or our revolution or whatever way you want to call it, and we're still talking about the fact that we're actually worse in terms of housing our youth. And I suppose that was brought home to us last week when Leo made a little dog whistle to the employers, where he said, wage inflation will hurt our competitiveness. It's always no one ever makes a sound saying, oh, higher profits are going to hurt our
I'm absolutely convinced that Fine Gael have invested heavily in sleeping bags and tents. I think that their entire future is built upon sleeping bags and tents.
I think their entire future is actually the generation that bought around the time of the boom, that were buried in negative equity. Fine Gael are invested in making them feel like they've actually come out of negative equity, and then counting on the fact that they'll get 36% of the vote, and that'll be enough to actually get there. I don't think they want to represent all of the people. I don't think he's a Taoiseach for all of the people. I think that's very clear. I think he's a Taoiseach for a certain, what he calls the people who get up early in the morning, which is obviously a very offensive term, really. But I think that's who he's aimed at. But like I still bring back to what I saw, some of the things you spoke with, Frankie. You were on Tonight TV3 and you're sitting opposite people and they're talking about the challenges facing children and teenagers and that in facilities in the inner city closing down and the likes of that. I suppose I'm very conscious that we had Glenn
Fitzpatrick,
and Glenn was very much of the mindset that the youth needs to get together and actually be more politically active. Do you see any of that?
Oh, you mean this youth shock thing?
Youth quake was the word.
Youth quake.
I kind of think I do. I think there's been a knock-on effect, maybe, and this is very impressionistic, but from the crash, and I think the politicisation seemed to take a while, so people got really badly screwed over, and that didn't seem to really turn into political capital, if you want to use that word, until a good few years later. And I think with this generation coming up, like, people give out about millennials and things like that, but they owning a home or even living outside their home is so unachievable to most of them. I think that has to turn into disenfranchisement, number one, but then activism, number two, because when someone's back is against the wall, they're going to fight back. So, and I think very much so that they're in that position. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I think young people are more political than
I don't know.
a generation previously. But it comes in cycles. You know what I mean?
Well, across the world, political movements start and end in colleges, and that's in universities. There's this huge politicisation of students. They are the driving engine for change the world over. You come to Ireland. No, you don't. No, you don't. You don't have it. You have the most conservative shower sitting in college who couldn't be arsed moving on anything.
Yeah, well, when I went to university first, and I think this has informed a lot, nowadays, because I had been very political as a teenager, then dropped back from it. And I think, my experiences is then when I went to Trinity, and I was studying English, and we're doing courses on post-colonial theory and things like this, and people are just fucking talking shite, and some of it is written to be difficult to understand, pretentious, jargon, all this kind of stuff. And these people
language of academia.
Yeah, and these people thought they were fucking Che Guevara. Do you know what I mean? Like sitting there on 60 grand a year writing post-colonial theory. And to me that was just, this is bollocks. You know what I mean? I don't think when you're talking about politics, you're talking about things that people can understand. You're talking about human interactions. Everybody has to do that every single day. It's not quantum physics. You can use everyday language. You can tell people, look, we need houses. How do we get them? We go out on the street, demand them, civil disobedience or protesting or campaigning.
Well, I took this on the other day that we need to change this spin is thrown at us. The media take on the spin and they just use the spin the whole time. And it's certain phrases. The ones I said were houses. So we need to stop talking about houses and start talking about homes. Need to stop talking about family hubs and start calling them what they are, which is homeless storage. But that's what they are.
Yeah, well, Little Britain was the first time they said this is a terror block. This is where they store working class people. It was on joke on Little Britain. But when you look at them, they look like industrial units a lot of the time.
All the best satire is true, and that's what gets you. It's that moment where you know it's true, and it comes down to, I suppose, then we're talking about, again, you've been into linguistics. We talk about the words that are used and the fact that we now have the strategic communications unit. I don't know if anybody saw this, that they went, I think they spent €40,000 going over to London to meet with the Tories spin unit. And now I'm going to credit Ken Fox for, I think it was Ken who got a couple of documents to show what actually, so he came out with this report. And the number one report was that basically, don't lie to the general public. They will see through the lies. So put the spin in the most comforting of ways. It's like where Owen Murphy came out a couple of weeks ago and he says, I can't say for certain that I'm going to fix the. So that's an admission that the housing crisis is going to get worse. But he's not saying it's going to get worse. I just can't commit to it. So it's.
Yeah, definitely. That spin thing is so effective, and you can see it. Everybody kind of does it as well. You do it in your personal life as well. It's just a matter of framing something in a different way.
Well, you're Facebook and everything, really. You're putting the whole Facebook spin. We have the perfect family. We have the perfect kids. Our Christmas tree is just like.
But that's always, everybody's, I suppose maybe that was even more so in the 1950s or whatever when people presented the perfect family, but they just did it IRL, as they say. But I think there's a massive opportunity there with social media. I think it's been incredibly influential in the water charges movement. I think it has been a very powerful force against some aspects of the establishment. For better or for worse. So I think in America with Trump sold himself as an anti-establishment figure. It certainly cut out an element and undercut an element of the elite, the media, the kind of liberal or neoliberal establishment. One side of them were undercut by Trump, and I think and Trump is a dastardly figure, of course. You have to just throw that in there before anybody. But I think you have to look at his audacity, and I think that's something that's been missing. There's a conservatism on the left in Ireland, certainly, and a nervousness about trying new things and about being bold and brash and about being too, a kind of nervousness about being too militant.
Above your station.
Yeah. So Sinn Féin got undercut by the water charges movement to an extent. They hadn't, you know, they had to move to follow the people, and I think that's a positive sign. And I think we needed audacity. It's a time for audacity. There's an opportunity there to be seized. You know,
people forget that about the water protests. It was portrayed in later times that it was all sinister fringe, and you know, it was, when the water protests started, it was grassroots, broad-based. You had people from Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, you had everybody involved, and nobody was flying flags. The flags only came later with the protest, and everybody has put, we did this, we did. Look, it was people together, not politics. It was the people who said, no, we've just had enough, this is the subject we pick, and we say, no, there's the line, you're not fucking crossing it.
I'm going to just, though, come back on something, and it comes back to the power of social media. And I know, we're not talking out of school here, Frankie. You've been involved in some of the more vitriolic sides of social media. So you've seen the difference between, you know, an actual debate on social media compared to bullying on social media. And what we, you know, like, again, we go back to a unity on the left and an actual call for, as you say, audacity, an opportunity there, because there is an opportunity. There's no question. We had Lorcan Sir sit here, and he said to us, this is going to matter now, because the middle class people are going to be upset when they find little Billy or Johnny can't get a house, or little Billy or Johnny can't get out of the house because he can't afford rent. It makes it an issue, and fighting over semantics, or fighting or actually becoming so entrenched that we can't even the word compromise is almost a dirty word to a degree, where some people are thinking, no, we won't compromise on that. And I always reminded that, you know, change won't just be as audacious as you think it'll be. You'll have to take enough people with you, and to bring them with you, you need to actually give them something to get to. When you see that on social media, how do you feel?
When I see, the spats and things like that. Well, you know, I've been accused of bullying. I've some fairly simple principles, you know, on terms of social media. So, you'll see, you know, habitually, if you go down people's timelines and they're quote tweeting people and holding them up for ridicule, you know, it's a very, very cruel thing to be doing, to be engaged in. Now, you know, the thing is, people see me arguing with someone else and they'll just see two people in it and things like this, but, you know, listen to me, I don't go after anybody. I'll defend myself when I'm attacked, and I make no apologies for doing it, because I've been slandered, I've been smeared, and things like that. So, you know, you have to defend yourself. But, you know, so my rules would be, I give someone a chance. You know what I mean? If they quote tweet me, I won't go at them the first time. They have to be a repeat offender, and I won't quote tweet someone or something. You know, if they haven't done it to me, they haven't, you know, held me up to try and get me dogpiled on and things like that. But it's you know, again, and it's like a microcosm of power dynamics. So it's completely not about the debate. So someone, if someone has a question or they want to have a debate with me, come and have a debate. Come and ask me, you know, or you know, challenge me. But it's not. It's grabbing, you know, screen grab and holding it up to get, you know, recruit other people involved. It's just schoolyard bullying. That's all it is, and it's pathetic. But you know, I suppose the difference between that and debate, like, and the power dynamics is, in a debate you test the ideas against each other. In that sphere, it's just a matter of, if someone has 10,000 followers, they're going to win, versus like someone who has 1,000 followers. It's just about metrics. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
no,
they can
that.
get, you know, a few thousand people against you and things like this. It's fucking pathetic. You know what I mean? It really is. It's nasty, childish, despicable behaviour. And anybody who calls himself a leftist who engages in that style of debate is you know, is a doorboard, as far as I'm concerned. And they should be expunged from the left immediately, because they are the people, and it's, you know, it's a very, very small and vocal minority, and people are scared to go up against them, and people will say things to you in private that they won't say publicly, and it's purely a function of how vitriolic and dominant these people are. You know, Nicholas Nassim Taleb has written about how a very small number of Wahhabis can dominate a region, you know, tiny percentage, if they're incredibly committed and cohesive.
Gurdjieff about that.
Yeah, if they're committed and cohesive as a group, versus, you know, people who are free thinkers, open to ideas, will get slaughtered. So it needs to be stood up against, and I think they've piggybacked on people's goodwill for far too long. They're bringing honourable issues such as gender equality, which I believe in passionately. They're bringing these issues into disrepute by using them as a platform to acquire and exhibit social dominance. So they're just trying to dominate in a social sphere and dominate a particular debate.
Me and Tony spoke. Tony wrote a piece over the Christmas, and it was about join the dots. And we were talking about this, and I said, well, that sort of ties into the idea I have of can we make this year going forward? And I hate that phrase, but yeah, can we make 2018 the year where we call out punching down? It started last year with Kevin Myers, George Hook, these men who...
Started last year with Leo Varadkar's...
Actually, it started at the beginning of the year with social welfare cheats. That was Leo punching down. There are far bigger targets for far bigger money that Leo could be going after. I mean, we could say bankers, we could say lots of things, or even on the social welfare end, bogus self-employment dwarfs anything that's been defrauded by claimants, yet nobody's doing anything about it. So Leo just punched down. He chose to pick out the weakest and punch on them. By the end of the year, we now have somebody apologising, saying no.
From the Department of Social Welfare, they came out and said they shouldn't have ran that campaign.
So my idea going forward is, look, if you're a banker and you're giving out about people on social welfare, you're punching down. Okay? Look to your own peers. Punch in your own weight class. Punch where you can make a difference. Or punch up. But stop punching down on people. And that goes for any sphere you're in. Stop punching down. I mean, people on the south side or Dublin 4 politics, look beyond those voices that turn up on Marion. There's a bigger world out there, and there are more diverse voices when you just have this group of people doing the same rhetoric over and over, and it's always the same thing. It's that those on the bottom of the ladder are the problem. They're the ones who need to be managed, when we actually know it's the ones at the top of the ladder that need to be managed the most.
Yeah, so I'm going to agree with you largely and disagree to a certain extent. So I think, again, with some of the people I'm criticising and some of the styles of discourse that I'm criticising, I think it's very noticeable that it's constant personality politics. They're constantly going after individuals. And the problems are not about individuals. The problems are systemic. The problem is the system. And, you get rid of the Garda Commissioner, you're going to get a fucking another Garda Commissioner, and it might even be worse. And it's the same, and it just allows the system to keep rolling by creating the illusion that we can have change by taking people out. And, if you look at people and they're taking pleasure in ruining individuals' careers or lives, even if they are despicable individuals, even if they've said despicable things, that is not politics. You know what I mean? That is not left politics. Left politics is about creating systemic change, creating change for everybody. Not taking down odious individuals, and because they're all fucking odious. The system is the big problem. And again, say for example with the Catholic Church, if you believe the Catholic Church is an effective system of indoctrination, which I think it is, you should have some empathy and some sympathy for people who are so indoctrinated that they become proponents of the church's ideology and things like that, rather than go, oh, look at this, this constant disgust that, oh, look at this person, and look, I've done it myself. Look, I fucking hate Varadkar, I hate Alan Chatter, I hate these individuals, I hated the Garda Commissioners, but I didn't take any pleasure in seeing them depart, because I knew that wasn't systemic change. So I think punch up, punch across. I definitely agree. Don't punch down. I think you have to defend yourself. I think people have to start defending themselves, because I think this stuff has been given a free ride on the left for far too long.
And I think it's very interesting what you're saying in terms of defending yourself, because you're right about one thing, and it really strikes a chord with me: the metric thing, the actual, especially online, where someone has, they call on the mob. Is now, because I always call them the flying monkeys.
Yeah, that was a brilliant article. So if anyone's listening, it's still up, is it? Yeah. Tony has an article called "The Flying Monkeys," and I read it a long time ago.
Which he robbed off me.
Do you hear this, lad?
That's true. He robbed it off me.
I have never read anything you've written. I don't think you've ever written anything. You keep saying he's a blogger, and I've never seen a blog. But no, in all honesty, I Jesus, like, you know, I've been down that road. I don't want to get into it because I don't even give oxygen to some of my own particular favourite trolls. I really don't. But I've seen it more recently over the Christmas where friends of mine were actually attacked, and the people were being attacked. They were taking stuff, not just screenshotting it from Twitter. They were taking it from Twitter to Facebook to poke fun at them.
Yeah.
And you're calling on the mob on Facebook, and
this was me who brought this up on Twitter, wasn't it? It was me who brought it up.
You brought it up, yeah.
On Twitter, yeah.
Yeah, well, I didn't, but again,
Labour's favourite troll.
But I don't. We're not going to go there. We're not going to even, because who wants to talk about this creep?
Yeah, again, it's not individuals. You know, like, you know, again, like if someone goes at me a few times, I might, you know, screen grab and say, look, this is happening, and that's been equated with bullying. That's been equated with, oh, you know, it's just the same thing, but it's not, because I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask them to come to me. I'll defend myself, but you know, it's a different word. But I tell you something else as well. I don't mistake that for politics. You know, that's not my fucking political activism, is not fighting back again. Well, maybe it is. But, you know, there needs to be some effective way of dealing with this.
I've seen some of the stuff you said, and I've seen some of the stuff other people have said, and my general concept of what you're saying is, look, we've lots of issues to fight. Stop pissing around fighting with each other.
Yeah, well, stop individualising it. Like, you know, in my article that caused all the ruckus, I didn't name anybody, you know, because I was talking about a language and a style of activism that I had issues with. I was talking about language used to describe me, you know, and, you know, if you can't object to that, we're in a bad position. And if you can't see, you know, if someone cannot see noble issues being brought into disrepute and being abused for bullying, for personal aggrandisement, for social dominance, if they can't see that, they're either, you know, lying or they're blind, because it's happening constantly on social media with people who call themselves left wing, and people are afraid to stand up to them. You know, people in the political parties particularly will say one thing to you in private, and they won't say anything you know, in public about this. So it needs to be stopped. But, you know,
I think it's an interesting point though that you've made, because you've just said something that strikes with me. People in political parties, because we are, myself and Martin, at loggerheads over the Labour Party.
Yeah, we do disagree big time.
And you know, I'd be very much in the mindset that that if you want to talk about a genuine unity of the left, you want to talk about what's actually building an alternative, they have a network, they have a grassroots, they have young active people who I like and admire, some of them. I think there is a problem of deficit of leadership, and I think that needs to be tackled, and I think the Tory light or the Blairite wing of it, or whatever way you want it, whatever frame you want to put on it, you know, is not helped by the fact that they're still talking about that we did nothing wrong since 2011, and I think that needs to be brought out into the daylight and said,
now,
look,
that's Tony's opinion.
Yeah,
that's my opinion is completely different. My opinion is, for as long as I can remember, Labour have propped up Fine Gael.
Yeah,
they have held this country in a two-party system that should have dissolved years ago, and Labour were the ones that have kept it they've stagnated politics in this country. And there are I read a piece going back 20 more years ago that explained that Labour are not Labour. Labour are conservative opportunists. And they have proved that every single time they've gone into government. So let's say, no, there are really good people in Labour, but Labour's not the right place to be. Go somewhere else. Finish Labour off, because all they're doing at the moment is trying to get themselves back into the position to be the third party. Get rid of them. You fucked up, you're gone.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to both points of view. I think, you know, there's some of the people that I think have been most effective, you know, in building the left over the past few years. And they're not people who are up on platforms. They're not people who are, you know, getting applauded or whatever. They're ordinary Joe and Jane Soaps from communities, and they vitriolically despise Labour. You know, to an irrational level. You know what I mean? But there's a reason for that, and that has to be understood. I also think, you know, my opinion, and again, like I'm not dismissive of any of the parties. People give out, for example, they say, oh, the Trots. You know, or you can't the Trots this, the Trots that. The Trots have done some fucking great stuff.
Yeah, and have
Do you know
some
what
great
I mean?
ideas.
Some great people in there. You know what I mean? Listen to me. You know, I think, you know, you can't be dogmatic about it. But I do believe, and this is my opinion, and listen, best to luck with the housing campaign that they're on about or whatever. You know, listen, I'll go on the May Day march. I have no problem being on a march that Labour is on. But I think a march in April is completely ineffective. There was a documentary about Rory Quinn when he was Minister for Education. And there was a big march that day by a powerful lobby. I think it was the Teachers' Union.
Yeah.
And he just shut the window. Yeah. And waited, you know, until the noise died down, and then opened the window again and got on with his work. You know what I mean? And marches to me don't do anything. You know, when we were having, I was at the very first meeting that Apollo House grew out of, and it was there was no idea. Dean Scurry got a lot of people together, we're in a room in Ballymun, and he got everybody to introduce each other. And after a while, we're all just talking about how great we were. And then John Connor said, "Listen, you're all very nice people, but it's getting late. Like, what are we here for?" And he was getting a bit, you know, annoyed.
Yeah.
And Dean says, "Well, what do you want to do, John? What do you care about? You know?" And John said, "I care about homelessness." And he goes, "Well, what do you want to do about it?" And John said, so the idea that it would be about homelessness came from John Connors. And Dean did, now the idea for the whole meeting, but there was no objective, you know, it came from Dean. And John said, "Well, we'll organise a march. We'll organise a march for homelessness." And Dean said, "No, I've been on loads of marches. They've done fuck all. We need a new paradigm. We need to do something else." And that was, you know, Apollo House, for all its problems, it had a lot of potential. And I think direct action and civil disobedience, peaceful, non-violent, you know, militant but non-violent, is the thing that the establishment are most terrified of, because it's incredibly difficult to fight against. You send the cops in there battering people, and nowadays with social media, with camera phones, everybody's going to know about it, and it will snowball and get worse and worse. So I think the days. Listen, I don't want to be going on any more marches. You know what I mean? I haven't seen them achieve much. I think, you know, it's you know, it's a good way to form cohesion and things as a group.
I think in fairness, the water protest movement made a significant change in the political landscape in Ireland. You can argue the results, but that it empowered. But
that
people.
Wasn't the marches. That was communities on the ground, non-payment, the civil disobedience.
Non-payment was the actual killer.
Well, not letting the meters in as well. Yeah, you know, they couldn't. I mean, it caused massive financial difficulty for the if you can't get the meters in the ground or they're being taken out. You know, it's completely.
But all the lies that we were told, because they kept releasing statistics piecemeal to show, like, they were, you know, the payment rates. And then do you remember when I broke them down, Martin? I took in, okay, this is how much you've taken in. You've 1.7 million households. You've this number of exemptions. So I said, so technically 28% of people have paid. Where did they come up with this 80% figure? And they were like, well, what we mean is 80% of people have paid something.
Actually, we saw probably for the first time in Ireland, probably it was made very clear to people, the difference between the actual data and what we were being presented en masse by mainstream media. It really did clue people into the idea that the mainstream media weren't reporting things or weren't questioning the sheets they were given to read out. They were just literally reading it out.
Again, this comes back to the fact that I'm not going to kick mainstream media for someone who's handed a brochure or a one-pager. They've to get it in a second, and if they get it up online or whatever it is, and we're in this news cycle.
I think there's serious problems with mainstream media, but I also think there's a serious misconception about how they operate and things like that on the left, and I think it's self-defeating. You know, a lot of the criticism you're seeing thrown at RTE is bang on the money. Their news coverage, for example, of the water protest was an absolute disgrace. The figures they were given for water marches, you could see with your own eyes. You could see with your own eyes. They were saying less than that. They were saying a few thousand. Things like this, you know, was completely not true. But then, you know, like, I know people in RTE that are, you know, left to their bone. You know what I mean? That are sincere, that are willing to give people a chance. And I'm talking in current affairs programming and everything like this. That are very dedicated, not only to fairness, but, you know, themselves see inequality and are totally dead set against it. The problems, you know, so for example, you know, this conspiratorial idea, I don't think that's how it functions. I think the demographics are one of the massive problems. And if you look in academia, if you look in RTE, if you look in any of these places, they talk a lot about gender equality or, you know, racial diversity, you know, these days, and, you know, there's been steps made towards that. You know, in terms of gender equality, certainly say in my departments, you know, there's the ratios are higher, women to men, but in terms of class, you have 0%, you know, less than 0%, or, you know, close to it, and that colours ideologically or the interests of those people. And, you know, Chomsky talks about manufacturing consent. There's a great film, you know, there's a great book about the film is up online if anyone wants to watch it, and he talks about that. Look, if you were an anarchist Bakuninite, you wouldn't have a fucking job as an editor of a paper. You just wouldn't get the job. It's not that these people are spouting lies. They oftentimes they really believe what's being said. It's just that if they believe something different, they would never have made it to that position. And there's filters, and it's not, you know, again, it's not this conspiracy. It's a system, a non-personal, impersonal system that is. Well, actually,
I spoke to a journalist on I call it Dinibot Radio anyway. I spoke to somebody who was on Dinibot Radio, and he was saying, you know, I'm selected. I got this job because, you know, I'm the right person for the job. And I said, no, you got the job because you think the right way. It's you went through that system. You've gone this system, and now your thinking process is down this particular route, and you don't have the objectivity to stand back and say, I'm working on Dinibot Radio, spouting Dinibot bullshit. You know, there's a reason I'm here. And there is a reason. Now, and the other thing I was going to say about inner city, and you were right about class, and there's a big difference beginning to show now, and I read it over the Christmas, and something we see mirrored in America is the opiate use in North Inner City is through the roof. It's through the roof. Same as it is in areas of America, is that people are getting themselves high out of the situation.
Yeah.
Life has become so shit that it's better to be high. And we saw it before. We saw it in the 80s, and we saw how it ravaged every place. And now it's on the way back, and it's coming back worse than it ever was. And that's class. That's to do with class. The drugs the middle class and the upper class use are different to the drugs that working class use. So when you see a spike in opiates, you know things are going downhill, and going downhill fast.
Yeah, you know, I suppose, you know, there's that figure, 5,400 people a year, preventable deaths in this country due to economic inequality. And, you know, that puts things in perspective, you know, and this straight white male bullshit needs to fucking stop, because, you know, I have a lot of friends that happen to be straight white and male, that aren't around anymore, or that ended up, you know, strung out on gear, or locked up, or had, you know, the most horrific and traumatic lives that you can imagine. So, you know, leaving out the class dimension from the analysis, which a lot of the identitarians do, is you know, despicable. You know, you know, 5,400 people a year dying. That's more than died in the entire Troubles, because of class. And if that was happening in one of these, in gender, in race, in sexuality, you know, these people would be screaming it from the rooftops. But they don't want to touch class. And you know, look at the reaction when a working class man shows up and you know, says something. It's, you know, these people are supposed to be left wing, but it's like a rhino walking into the Natural History Museum. You know what I mean? They don't know what to do with it.
I think it was, I was saying to this is Arundhati Roy. She writes brilliantly anyway, and I'm a big fan. But she talks about the what you call class warfare. She calls them lifestyle wars. That there's a necessity to have the division of the socio-economic classes, because, you know, it keeps them over there and it keeps us in a style we're accustomed to, and even though the people who are in their bubbles are for the most part unconscious of it, you know, that there's just, these are the divisions. Now, I don't doubt for 1 second I am the evil banker who was there at the crash. I was there, and I know people who took their own lives when they lost their sense of identity, because they thought, you know, I've lost my job, I don't know who I am anymore, and, you know, their families are now broken and fractured and gone, and there's no amount of platitudes or words that I can say that can actually that can fix that. But we do have to say then, from a leftist point of view, is what are we doing that's actually going to say there's a different way because the cold hard reality of it is that we have still got a minority government. We've still got Fianna Fáil in a de facto coalition with them, and you know, we have these numbers of people on the left who cannot coalesce over the simplest of topics.
I'm not as pessimistic as a lot of other people. So look at Corbyn, look at Sanders. Very simple platform: housing, healthcare, education.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, and who on the left, in broad terms, in Ireland, does not support Corbyn or Sanders? You know what I mean? Basically nobody, and nobody worth anything. Anyway, that's for sure. The other thing is as well, in terms of political upsets, did people predict Trump? Did people predict Brexit?
Now I'm with you on that.
They
You
didn't.
can't.
They didn't. So everybody's saying, naysaying it and saying it can't happen. They're full of fucking shit. Right, you know, saying it can't happen. Now you can talk about the challenges and the obstacles and things like this. You know what I mean? But you know, in terms of the prospects for ousting Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael hegemony, which is what it is. It's been there since the foundation of the state. We need fucking change.
I was at Yanis Varoufakis talking a few months ago in the Tivoli, and it was amazing because I've seen Yanis a few times, and he gave the speech again, and I was like, oh, here comes the speech again.
Yeah.
And Vincent Brown stood up afterwards, and Vincent Brown just said, that's all wonderful, Yanis. That's all bullshit. Right. Tackle hegemony. He said, everywhere you see hegemony, fight it. And he said, fight, hegemony, whatever way you want to call it, guys. Just and that's all he said. He said you can leave here now, and we can talk about a pan-European movement, and we can talk about all of these big ideas. But if we had that as one thing, he said that would actually scare the shit out of the...
Well, if that comes back to punching in your own weight class, doesn't it, really?
Well, it comes out to punching up.
And punching in your own weight class. I mean, if you're Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael grassroots, and this came up recently on Twitter with me, I said, if you voted Fine Gael, you are responsible for homelessness. And this guy came back to me on Twitter and said, that's a ridiculous thing to say. And I'm saying, but how can you say that's a ridiculous thing? You voted for the party that are saying we'll normalise homelessness. And he goes, yeah, but that's not how it works. And I said, but yeah, that's exactly how it works. If you vote for Fine Gael, you are voting for homelessness. And then we saw over the Christmas, there was a bit of tete-a-tete or a banter going on. Young Fine Gael got kind of offended by our old pal.
Our pal Joan Collins, who friend of the pod, as we like to say. Joan was on with us, and then over Christmas she came out on the wrong side of the. She
said Merry Christmas to everybody except Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil and Labour, wasn't that it?
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah,
pretty much, and of course the hard right element that is actually young Fine Gael came out and tried to play cutesy by going through anonymous accounts and then coming on their personal accounts and
that was funny. This guy, and he says, I never engaged with you before, but just seconds earlier had been tweeting from an official account and the location was the same. Somebody else pointed it out.
Yeah. But look, I mean, but Lenny Abramson then took a lot of crap, if you saw on Twitter, because he put up that he said, when I start to think that I've faith in humanity again, I remind myself that young Fine Gael and Ogra Fianna Fáil exist. And people said...
brilliant. I didn't see him saying that. Yeah, that's brilliant, yeah.
And people turned on him and said, why would you give out about young people being engaged in politics? And I'm just thinking, no, you don't get it. Lenny has every right to say that this mentality is a problem, because it's almost, because it's
not just a problem. I mean, they're killing 5,400 people a year with their policies. You know what I mean? The policy, homeless, and you know this, I'm not preaching to converted here, but we are paying, the Exchequer is paying hotels and private landlords rather than 2 million a day, rather than build social housing, right? It's going into the hands of the wealthiest rather than building something that is a resource and housing the people in decent homes that they can live in, that they have security in. So it's policy. It's not a matter of saving money. No. It's not a matter of we don't have the money. It's costing more to have people homeless than it is to build them homes. And I think that's an important point. It's costing more to keep people homeless than it would be to put them in homes. So it's not. It's this mentality of we don't have the money. That's constantly the spin that's put out, but it's not the case.
More importantly, like when you exactly like that, we talk about illogically capitalist. Okay?
Yes.
A genuine capitalist would actually see the common sense of something as basic as a universal basic income these days. You do universal basic income and you eliminate the need for processing. You will save money in your actual, how your payments are done. You would reduce the overall payment, and all of a sudden everybody's on a level playing field.
Look at the cost of the Department of Social Welfare, just running. That's
my point.
Imagine
Imagine,
they knew this 25 years ago.
I know, Mark, but my point is, but because people then, someone else on the flip side says, oh sure, if you do that, people, where's the incentive for people to get out and get a job? And you look at every single example where they've done this, it actually, people become net contributors.
It's outcome thinking, I think, is very important, and it's the same with drugs. People talk about the morality of drugs and things like that, or crime and punishment, and you have to punish them and things like this. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to cause more suffering, or do you want there to be less victims?
Yeah.
And the studies say if you want there to be less victims, you take a rehabilitative approach, and so thinking in terms of consequences rather than morality, I think is an important thing for the left.
There was a moral imperative in the past, both with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and let's give credit where credit is due. There was a moral imperative to build social housing. Yeah, well, and at the times of most want, they built the most social housing.
Well, people talk about not being the money. This is constantly they're not being the money for social housing. But forgetting the fact that it's costing more to keep people in hotels and keep people, forgetting that for a second. My mate lives in the Tenters. Outside is gaff carved in stone onto the wall is 1922, and that's when those houses were built. They were the first houses built by the state. And don't turn around and try and tell me that we're poorer now than we were in 1922.
I'm going to tell a little story, and this is a little personal anecdote. My gran died over the Christmas.
Sorry to hear that, man.
They lived in the Midlands, and herself and her husband, going back 70 years ago, shared a house, 2-room house, no running water, back when there was no running water, no electricity, nothing. And there was social housing built 70 years ago. And my gran trekked up and down, walked up and down, and looked at every brick that went into that house while it was being built. They moved into it. They raised 5 daughters. Of the 5 daughters, you had teacher, shopkeeper, what else you had? Accountant, good jobs.
Yeah.
Those 5 women, their descendants. So from that house, there's 37 descendants that came out of that house. Every single one of them works. Every single one of them owns their own house or is in the process of owning their own house. So the idea that social housing is some sort of free housing, or that it traps people in social poverty, it does on its arse trap them in social
my
poverty.
granddad worked in Wavin Pies factory in Balbriggan. He worked there his whole life. He had a car, had a house. It was a corpo gaff. Supported his family financially. Only one person in the household worked, and supported the extended family then to a large extent. I mean, we spent a lot of time in that house as grandkids and things like that. Try doing that now on industrial wage, buying a house, running a car, and someone else
and
not
raising a family.
Yeah, and raising a family, and this is the thing as well. I think it's someone should be able to afford not to work in a family. You know what I mean? And it shouldn't be the woman. It shouldn't fall naturally to the woman by any stretch of the imagination. But 2 people working in a family is very stressful. I think on people when they have young kids.
Well, I think
I don't think it's fair. On the people that they have to do that. They have to buy it. You need two incomes to buy a house.
There's a design to this in that occupied monkeys are less likely to be militant monkeys.
Absolutely.
And there is a design to this.
Absolutely.
Is to keep everybody so occupied, whether it be occupied fighting poverty, occupied paying your mortgage, occupied trying to put a roof over your head for the night. When you're occupied like that, you don't have the time to get political.
There's a very interesting thing that happened about 15 years ago in the banks when they used to do employee satisfaction surveys. They stopped doing them and they call them engagement surveys.
Right.
So they didn't give a shit whether you were satisfied in your job anymore. They wanted to know how engaged you were. So if you were busy with your nose to the grindstone, you were engaged, you were in, and that was how productive you were. And they stopped measuring the satisfaction because, and they had this big, big PR thing. Said, oh, we might measure engagement now because an engaged employee is a happy employee. And as you said, it was like, well, he hasn't got time for anything else,
Yeah.
Well, this comes back to language, and you're very big into language, Frankie, and it comes back to language, the use of language.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the things, being into linguistics and stuff like that is, and it just reminded me about the John Collins TD, the Fine Gaelers giving out about her saying this. You know what I mean? I mean, you're killing 5,400 people a year. What the fuck are you moaning about someone saying something? Someone saying something that was, not nice. It wasn't even cruel. It wasn't even mean.
Yeah.
But you see a mirror image of that, I suppose, on the left with this obsession with language policing and getting people fired and getting people trying to for saying something bad, and it can be a distraction from the fact, again, I know I'm repeating this all the time, but 5,400 people are dying because they do not have basic needs like healthcare, like housing, like decent food. People can't afford to buy decent food or things like this. So I see a Discord, and I think I mentioned it earlier when I was in Trinity with this kind of academic idea of your academic work is activism, and I don't see my academic work as activism at all. So I'm into linguistics, but I see quite a separation between that and my political work. There are some political elements like about dialect and about class and dialect and things that I'm interested in, but I certainly don't see it as activism, and I don't see language policing as something that the left should concern themselves with. I think we need to get people houses, we need to get people healthcare, we need to get people resources.
Language policing, though, is I'm gonna actually be a bit more how to put this, a bit more uplifting on it, and turn around and say, well, I'm conscious there's 3 Dubs sitting here now, and I'm conscious of the different strains of the Dublin accent, and the fact that my daughter told me that there with all the wrapping paper for Christmas to take out the trash stand. I said, I don't believe this is where we are.
Well, you're getting an erosion of the accent. So one of the things that was thrown at me, and it was disgusting thing that was said was that when I was on Cutting Edge and I was talking about the Dublin dialect getting eroded, and someone said it was a dog whistle to white supremacists, and an anti-immigration thing or something. I've always been pro-immigration. I was on the Mitch from school going,
what your Dublin accent is?
No, me complaining about the Dublin accent fading out. And the reason it's not because of immigration that it's fading out. If you listen to the sons and daughters of immigrants, a lot of them have real thick Dublin accents, just exactly like me. The reason it's fading out is American cultural imperialism, and it's something that you can't really fight against it. To trying to engineer language is kind of a doom project in a lot of instances. But like the trash thing, my little brother didn't know what a lurry was, and lurry was always the word that was used. He said truck, and he was like, "What?
Get a backer
off a lurry." Yeah.
I was saying I have 2 daughters, and the eldest girl, there's 9 years between them, or the eldest woman, excuse me, she's not a girl anymore. The eldest woman, she has a dub accent that she quite likes to cultivate, and it is her accent, and she likes her dub accent. The 11-year-old is Disney Channel. She talks with a Disney Channel accent, and one gives out to the other. The eldest one gives out to the youngest one a better accent, but diapers, trash, binky,
trainers instead of runners.
And it's such a huge and if I see Disney Channel
or sneakers instead of runners is even
any
worse.
Of those American channels on, I'm immediately, it's a rot in your brain. Stop, it's rot in your brain.
It's sad, because I like that linguistic diversity, and there's a richness to all different dialects. I think Hiberno English is there's much more to it than people think. So people comment about the accent, but there's different dimensions. So it's a dialect. It's not just an accent. Accent just means the way you sound. But of course, there's words.
Exactly.
There's a syntax.
And when we lose that, we lose the colloquialisms. We lose the.
Well, I suppose a good example of it is the word bollocks. Bollocks can be used as an insult, as an endearment.
Yeah.
It's that and it's a word you take outside of Ireland, and it's not in the American lexicon at all.
Yeah, well, and a lot of this stuff. So, people talk a lot about the influence of Irish on Dublin English or Hiberno English generally. So they'll talk about the habitual present tense, the do be, or do be in the pub, and they'll say it comes from Irish. I'm kind of skeptical because you were talking about Black American English, for example, and that has he be working. You know, that has a habitual present tense as well. But then if you look at Hiberno English, a lot of it comes from English of an older period. So we say certain things that are in Shakespeare that have fallen out of use in England, but are still in Hiberno English. So, for example, Jacks, quintessentially Dublin word for toilet. I don't know, did they say Jacks in the countryside? Did they say?
No, well, they only refer to the Jacks when they're as a derogatory about the Dubs.
Okay, right, yeah, well, so Jacks is in Shakespeare, Hamlet. No, it's not. It's one of the other plays. It's Henry II or something, and it says, "I'll daub the walls of a Jacks with you." You know, so Shakespeare said Jacks. You know, he called the toilet the Jacks. Pox is in Hamlet. You know, English people don't say pox or poxy either. London, I think a little bit Cockneys do say it. But begin, murderer, pox is a line from Hamlet. So these come over here with the Tudor conquest, you know, settled in Dublin. It doesn't come from Irish or anything like that. It comes from that. So we have to take ownership of our English heritage as well, and it's nothing to be ashamed of.
And my name is Groves. It's hardly it's from the Gael.
Yeah, exactly. So, and if you look at Irish society, you know, we're an Anglophone nation. English is the first language in this country. Gaelic, you know, this is a controversial territory as well, but Gaelic came here. You know, the people that built Newgrange didn't speak Irish, right? They spoke a pre-Indo-European language, and the Celts came in after, you know, long after Newgrange was built, and it came here the same way the English did, on horses, with swords, by conquest. And, you know, so I don't think Irish is any more Irish, or the Irish language is any more Irish than Hiberno English, and I think we need to start being proud of it, you know. And
again, I'm very conscious of this. It's because I see all this crap all the time where... we saw what happened yesterday. The news emerged about the people in direct provision who were denied a Christmas party by Aramark in Limerick. And of course the head cases came out and said, you know, send them home, let them starve, and the anti-immigrant tone that comes out of it, and they talk about protecting our culture. And then you look at them and you go, you moron.
Don't just...
No, but hang on.
You know not to start me off.
No, but hang on. That's what I don't engage. But my point is, culture evolves. Culture never... You can't...
Absolutely.
If you want to put it in a Tupperware bowl and protect it like that, well, then you're a moron.
Absolutely. Well, I had an article in The Village last month. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah,
did you see it? So, you know, I said in it, we are the descendants of Celts, Vikings and English settlers, all of who came here on horses, with swords, with conquest. You know what I mean? By how can we object to people coming here carrying not weapons but carrying babies to escape war, not to come to wage war on us? We are the descendants of immigrants. We are the descendants not only of immigrants, we're the descendants of conquerors, of violent invaders.
You have a guy who was kicked out of Fine Gael this year and lives in the leafy suburbs of fucking South County Dublin, and he's talking about the Muslim invasion. And you're like, will you cop yourself the fuck on? You're not living in a war zone. Look around you. But and that group of people that are involved in this, it's a small group. But their voice is quite loud.
It's dangerous, and it's dangerous because it plays on people's fears. You know what I mean? You know, and you have this fear of you know, I suppose an ancestral thing with the Irish about invasion and about conquest. But also, if you look at the causes of Wahhabism and the cause of Islamic fundamentalism and extremism, it's Western intervention, you know, 100% fact. The Patriarch of Baghdad, the Chaldean Catholic Patriarch, you know, and this is another thing as well. If you look at the Middle East, it has a rich variety of religions, pre-Christian religions, Zoroastrianism, Mandaeanism. We don't have any of them in Europe because we've stamped them all out. So when they say Islam is intolerant, it's absolute bullshit. The Patriarch of Baghdad, who's seen you know, the Christian population have to flee and become refugees in many instances, has said that the cause of that is not you know, the root cause is not the Wahhabism and the fundamentalism. It's Western intervention that caused that, and they wanted to break these states. People talk about they smashed up Iraq and they smashed up Libya and it went bad. You know, it didn't go. That's exactly what they wanted to do. They wanted to break the states in bits, and they didn't care. You know, again, people talked about Hillary. There's 1 million dead in Iraq. She was pro-intervention. You know,
it went bad 100 years ago with the Balfour Declaration.
And
that was Western intervention. And now we've still been
But the idea that these young guys now, and they are young guys, predominantly young guys. I know there are older guys that are you know, the hierarchy of these systems. But these young guys that are being mouthy on Twitter or mouthy in social media about hard right values and, for want of a better word, fascist fucking values.
Yeah.
They have no idea the historical context.
Yeah, exactly, it's historically illiterate. You know what I mean? It's historically illiterate. But again, the left is feeding them and giving them ground constantly by you know, this kind of refusal to discuss and debate issues, and it's empowering the alt-right, which is a very dangerous situation, I think, you know. So again, like, look at those, the arguments are so powerful, and if you put the arguments out there and say, look, we are you know, a product of mixing, we are a product of invaders, we are a product of you know, immigration, we're you know, and that is the historical fact. You know, that it's kind of, it's very easy to defeat those arguments, but you have to put it out there. You can't just scream and shout and
well,
say.
I think we both agree with you on that, and we're going to finish it up now. I was going to say to you about mixing. This is New Year's Eve. What does Frankie Gaffney do on New Year's Eve?
I'm going to be working tonight. I'm going to be working all night of a deadline. So I'm writing a chapter for the PhD on typography. So it'll be a nice reprieve from the intensely political
so
stuff.
You're not going to get a party in at all? No few drinks? Nothing?
No, nothing at all. The phone is hopping there. People trying to persuade me to go out and all, but I'm. I know. I know how to party when the time comes.
Well, I appreciate you taking time out, because I know I kind of gave you a little bit of, come on, Frankie, let's get this
yeah,
started.
no. It's good to get out and get a bit of socialisation in. And again, I think the podcast is fantastic. On the off chance that anyone tuned in specifically to listen to me, they should check out the back issues, and it's a really good thing. Again, those alternative forms of media, I think there's a real opportunity there, because there's no gatekeepers anymore. It can be just put out there, and if it grows and snowballs, you know, it can be extremely powerful. So I think it's great work that you're doing.
With two guys, and you can attest to this, with two guys with an iPad, if two guys with an iPad can do this, think of what people who have some real input could do. You know, we're just two guys with an iPad. There are people out there way better than us. Way better than us.
I wouldn't say that now. I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't say it either.
I
know that.
Modest for the
know
new
that.
year, okay? I am trying to be modest. Flow with this.
Listen, lads, Happy New Year to you guys, and thanks very much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, it's an honour.
I just want to thank you all for listening, and remind you can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you get your podcast from. Please take a minute and leave us a review, and don't forget to tell your friends. Keep an eye out on the website, echochamberpod.com. You get all our previous podcasts and some new blogs. I've written some. I don't think Martin's ever written anything. You can send us an email to theechochamberpod@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter @echochamberspod. Thanks again, folks. Thanks so much.